Hello, everyone. Today is May 24th, and we're celebrating Memorial Day. On this day in the United States, we remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice, their life, to protect our country. In this fast-paced world, take a moment and honor those who have fought for our freedoms, for the freedoms that we have today. And I looked up on the internet and found a Britannica website. You can look it up. It talks about Memorial Day. It says Memorial Day in the United States, it's a holiday, the last Monday in May, honoring those, so tomorrow would then be Memorial Day, but honoring those who have died while serving in the country's armed forces. It originated during the American Civil War when citizens placed flowers on graves of those who had been killed in battle. The first national observance was in 1868, after World War I. The name was changed to Memorial Day, and in 1971, it became a federal holiday. The day is observed by visits to cemeteries where flags and other items are placed on the graves of veterans. There are also parades and ceremonies. In addition, Memorial Day is considered the start of summer in the United States. So I wanted to read all that just to say, because Memorial Day, we remember things that happened, events, our loved ones that served in the military, and protecting our country, right? So that's just one example of remembering things that happened that affect our future, that affect our today. It's important also to remember all the things that God's done in our lives. We see one biblical example of a memorial in Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. So we'll go to Joshua chapter 4. And it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one man from every tribe, and command them, saying, Take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. You shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, Cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in the time to come, saying, What do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it crossed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever. And the children of Israel did so just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood, and they are there to this day. So you can keep reading the rest of that chapter, but we see in this passage, God commands Joshua to have one man from each of the 12 tribes pick up a stone from the middle of the riverbed. Then they got to the other side. They set up these 12 stones at Gilgal as a permanent memorial of God, drying up the waters so they could cross over with the ark. So that's how they are remembering what God did for them and helped them get to the other side, right? While this specific 12-stone memorial was built after crossing the Jordan River to enter the Promised Land, it is deeply connected to the crossing of the Red Sea. We're going to read in Exodus chapter 14. Then Joshua chapter 4, verse 23 says, "For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over. That all," verse 24, "that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." So Joshua explains that God did this to show his mighty hand, just as he did in the Red Sea. The Israelites' time in the wilderness, as well as in the New Testament regarding the general condition of humanity. So Exodus chapter 14. I think we have time. I'm just going to read through the chapter so you get the. Now the Lord spoke, Exodus chapter 14. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn and camp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal-zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so that he will pursue them. And I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord." And they did so. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, "Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" So he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. Also he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt, with captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them by camping by the sea, by Pi-hahiroth, before Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us, to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, 'Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness." You can imagine they're close to the water, right? Then in all of the Egyptian armies behind them, they're stuck. So they're doubting what God told them. And Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." And the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea." That right there is a miracle too, because we know what a little bit of water from rain does to the ground of mud, and you sink in it, right? Imagine the whole sea. They wouldn't have been able to get across that if God hadn't dried it up. "And indeed I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen." The angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, And the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud of darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. I can't imagine how interesting that would be. We only have the movie, I'm seeing the movie with like the jelly wall sides and the fish swimming in there. Could you imagine the sight? They're scared. They're trying to get through that water, but how beautiful it must have been to see the sea like at an aquarium. That's neat there, but walking through those walls, that could be amazing, could be scary, right? Because you think, how is that staying there? God's doing it. They have to have trust and faith, God, that won't come crashing down on them. But um, so verse 22, so the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots and on their horsemen. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained. But the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. So you can imagine, and that both times, and they remembered what the Lord had done for them. They remembered the Lord got out of a bad situation into a better one, right? Um, so it's important to, then this was the day for us to remember, and then it's important to remember all the things God's done for us. I've got a few scriptures. The Old Testament, it talks about forgetting God's works. These passages describe the Israelites repeatedly witnessing God's miracles, but quickly forgetting his deeds and turning to disobedience when faced with new challenges. The first one is Psalm 78, verse 11. Psalm 78, verse 11. And they forgot his works and his wonders that he had shown them. So God had shown them things, but they forgot. Psalm 106, verse 21 and 22. Oh, I should. There's another Psalm 78. Sorry. Psalm 106, verse 21 and 22. They forgot God, their Savior, who had done great things in Egypt, wondrous works in the land of Ham, awesome things by the Red Sea. Think about that. The first generation lived it and witnessed it. And each generation after gets a little bit farther away from that actually seeing it. So I can kind of understand them maybe forgetting it if their parents don't pass it down. But Psalm 78, verse 42. Psalm 78, verse 42. They did not remember his power, the day when he redeemed them from the enemy. Then Romans chapter 1, verse 21. Romans chapter 1. Verse 21. That's New Testament. But because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Psalm 103, verse 2. Psalm 103, verse 2. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Deuteronomy chapter 8. Verses 11 through 14. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. So Deuteronomy 8 through 11:14 warns that when life becomes comfortable, people often become proud and forget the Lord who rescued them from slavery. Verse 15, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness in which were fiery serpents and scorpions. And you can keep reading through there. Psalm 106:13. I read that one. No, I did. Psalm 106. Verse 13. They soon forgot his works. They did not wait for his counsel. So we see that they're forgetting what God's done and they're starting to go and do their own thing, right? They to combat this, forgetting what God's done. To combat this, the Bible repeatedly commands believers to remember when you find yourself forgetting what God has done. The psalmist suggests intentionally reflecting on his past deeds. Excuse me. Psalm 77, verse 11 through 12. I know this is a lot of scriptures, but Psalm 77, verses 11 through 12. I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. I will also meditate on all your work and all your deeds. So that tells us to remember, right? And meditate on the things of the Lord. 1 Chronicles 16:12. I don't know why I always have a hard time finding First Chronicles. 1 Chronicles 16. Verse 12. Remember his marvelous works, which he has done, his wonders and the judgments of his mouth. Then we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. You can read the whole chapter, but I'll read part of it, I think. 1 Samuel chapter 17. It talks about David, and we know that David used his past experiences to propel him through his next battle. But I'd like to read it. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Sokot, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Sokot and Ezekah. Sorry, I can't pronounce these names. In the Ephes Damim, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had a bronze armor on his legs, and bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. Can you imagine having to have somebody go before you to hold your shield? I can't even. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves. So he's taunting them. He's saying, choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. You can imagine this big giant. I know, pastors, we've talked about this before, but how intimidating in the natural that would be. to see this big giant of a man saying, send one man out to fight me. And he has a man carrying his shield. That shield, that man carrying that shield was probably would have been about the size of the people that were supposed to fight him. But if I prove, verse 10, and the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Then Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and who had 8 sons, and the man was old, advanced in years, in the days of Saul. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to the battle. The names of these 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab, the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. Can you imagine him saying that for 40 mornings and 40 nights? Then Jesse said to his son David, take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain. And these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Now Saul and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the things and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. Then as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Then he turned from him toward another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. Now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported him to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So we see then verse 33 through 37, I'm almost finished. Then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion, here's his testimony, and a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from his mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both a lion and a bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord, he's remembering, right? The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. So we see, because of David's previous battles, he grew in his confidence. He knew it was the Lord that helped him defeat the lion and then defeat the bear. So he had confidence in the Lord, in his memories, that he could defeat Goliath also. So it's important to remember all the things that God's done for us. I'm just going to give you a short couple things. In December of 2021 to the first part of January 2022, Pastor Skip was in the hospital. The outcome in the natural didn't look good. However, God did a mighty work in our lives, and we celebrate around this time. And we are thankful to have Pastor Skip with us. What the enemy meant for evil, God was faithful and got us through that terrible situation. So every year around Christmas and New Year's, I remember God healed Skip, that great work he did in his body, and now we have him here today. We could have not stood in faith, and I'm sure the outcome would have been different. Also, another thing that we remember, Noah had appendicitis, and God gave us a peace when we were dealing with that situation. We knew, Skip and I, we knew that God was in control. And now when October comes, we remember and celebrate Noah's victory. What a mighty work God did in Noah's body. And then one more example, Connor has a reminder on his right hand. Every time he looks at his fingers, he's reminded of how God protected his right hand. So it is always a good idea to set a memorial and remember what great things God has done in your life. I encourage you to get a notebook and write down on paper and make sure to date them. Because I have papers that don't have dates and I don't remember when they're from, but Pastor Pauline always dated everything. She kept great records. So to date them. So when you become overwhelmed with life, you can look back in that notebook or notebooks and remember how God has moved in your life. Remind yourself what God has gotten you through so you can be encouraged. He will get you through this event also. Thank you for listening, and remind yourselves to be thankful for all the great things God's done in your life. Have a great day. God bless you.